can you share your thoughts on the significance of the 100th anniversary of the Republic of Turkey, both in the historical and contemporary contexts? In the historical context, the significance of the revolution which brought about the 100th anniversary of the Republic today is immense. It changed what one used to call the Ottoman Empire into a republic. So both the historical context is immense, but so is the contemporary context. The contemporary context is there to remind Turks of what happened 100 years ago. And what happened 100 years ago is of immense historical interest. It is something which all students, not only students, but all Turks ought to bear in mind and think about as they live. What was envisioned for the Republic 100 years ago, which really ties in with the first question. What was envisioned was to describe the Turkey that Mustafa Kemal was about to create was going to be a modern state, a state as a part of the modern world, no longer the part of the world that the Ottoman Empire had been, no longer a part of its relationship with, let's say, the Arabs. It was going to be more in context of Europe, because that was described as modern. And that was envisioned for the Republic for the 100 years ago. How was this to be brought about? The answer to this, Mustafa Kemal said, was education. Every Turk had to be educated in what was going along in the world. And of course, we'll come to this in a minute. When he carried out his revolution, one of the most important revolutions was the revolution in language. He in fact, if you like, created Turkish. Before that, what was spoken, what was written in the empire of the Sultan, Osmanlıca, the language of the Ottomans, not the language of the Turks. So he creates a language of the Turks, and this is something which he wants all Turks to learn. From this follows the next question: how did the legacy of the Ottoman Empire influence the early years of the Republic of Turkey? Well, I've already, in a sense, addressed this in the sense that the Republic of Turkey was going to get away from the Ottoman Empire and its legacy. There was no more Sultan. There was no more Caliph. In fact, we will come to this in a minute. The country that was being created was going to be secular. It would be Muslim, yes, you would be a Muslim, but you would be a secular Muslim. And like Muslims I can't think of countries where they are secular and Muslim, because when they are Muslim, they tend to be religiously so. This is true of the Arab world. And here, of course, thinking about all this, one can't help but think about what is happening in a country like Iran today. Iran today is a country which has had a revolution, a political revolution, in which they overthrew the ruler of the country in 1989. But they didn't revolutionize the country as Mustafa Kemal did. Mustafa Kemal also overthrew the ruler, the Ottoman ruler, but he then began to transform the country into what it would become. How have the principles of Kemalism shaped the trajectory of the Republic of Turkey over the past century? Well, his principles, as I said, one of his main principles was education. Where I live at the moment, Darüşşafaka, there is a bust of Mustafa Kemal under which it says the main element in a man's life, in a person's life, is knowledge. It is knowledge which shapes the way we think, what we know, what we've learned. And this is what was one of the principles which shaped the Republic of Turkey over the past century. How has the political life evolved over the past century? In your opinion, what key milestones stand out over the past century, political life has evolved in a number of ways. First, the removal of the old regime, the removal of the Sultan, the change of language, the importance given to education. In fact, Mustafa Kemal is said to have asked each citizen to educate a non-educated citizen. There were millions after all. What was the level of education when Mustafa Kemal and the Kemalists took over? About 9% of the country. With education, it would rise, but it would require the impact of each and every citizen in educating a person. Now this, of course, applies not so much to the towns, where there was education which was quite widespread, but it affected the countryside. It was the countryside, it was in the villages, in the village towns, where people still didn't know how to read and write. And the country was predominantly rural. So it was there that this business of changing people was implied. And how did they do this? Well, they just didn't leave it to individuals. They founded what we know as the village institutes. And the village institutes would play a very important role in the education of the villager. And in fact, any of you who are interested in this should read the work of people like Fakir Baikut, and you will get an idea of what was implied. I will go back to these questions because they're all tied together, but now I come to another question. How has the role of and status of women in Turkish society evolved since the Republic's inception? Well, here I want to bring about the difference between reformers and revolutionaries. Before Mustafa Kemal came to power, you had a revolution of 1908, the Young Turk Revolution, Ittihad ve Terakki, Union and Progress. These were people who were very serious reformers. They believed in reforming the empire. They didn't believe in removing the empire, the Sultan or the Caliph. They thought by making a constitutional regime in which the Sultan was the head, everything would be fine. They would reform. And when it came to the question of, let's say, women in the Young Turk period, 1908-1918, they believed that women should be educated. They believed in the education of schools for women. But they believed that the reason for educating women at that time was very simply that they would be better housewives and that they would be better mothers. They didn't intend to bring women into Ottoman society. Ottoman society would stay as it was. Now, here was a very basic principle between the Unionists, of whom Mustafa Kemal was one. I mean, he used the party, but he was different from them because he believed that not only should you educate the women to read and write and to be intellectuals like men, but they should enter society. They should participate in professions. They should become doctors. They should become lawyers. They should become teachers. They should become anything that was open to men. That was the most basic difference between the two periods. And of course, as a result of this, women did get educated. But beyond that, as I said, they began to enter society. Laws were passed where they could vote in elections. Not only vote in elections, but get elected to parliament. So by the 1930s, you have women who've entered parliament. And this, of course, has continued and has been a very important element of Turkish life ever since. Now, what lesson can the world learn from Turkey's journey over the past 100 years? I don't know about the world, but underdeveloped societies can learn a great deal. In fact, when I was a student, I read the memoirs of Jawaharlal Nehru. I don't know if all of you know who he was. He was the first Prime Minister of independent India, when India became independent from the British in 1947. Now, he wrote his memoirs in 1935, and he thought, and he writes, that Mustafa Kemal is carrying out a great revolution in Turkey. This is in 35. We know that a revolution is being carried out in Turkey, and I will come back to some of the points that were thought. And he said, we would like to carry out a similar revolution, but unfortunately we can't. Why? Because India is much bigger than Turkey. Its population is much larger. It is divided in many linguistic areas, religious areas. So it would be very difficult to carry out the reforms, although they tried. If you study India in the 1950s, they're carrying out a lot of reforms which are similar to what was carried out in Turkey, including the language reform. They tried to introduce one language in India, but in India there was such a revolt against that idea. People said we have our own languages, and it's true. In India they do have their own languages. We have Bengali, we have Madrasi, but when a law was passed, no, the language of India would be Hindi, people who believed a great deal in their own languages burnt themselves, so that Nehru had to withdraw this element. Fortunately, Turkey never had this kind of problem. Well, the question that was asked was, as a prominent scholar in Turkish politics, what advice would you give to a younger generation aspiring to understand the Republic? First, I question the fact that you call me a prominent scholar in Turkish politics. Like other students, I've been studying Turkish politics, Indian politics, politics generally. My advice to anyone who is studying politics is to read a lot of history, because everything emerges from the past and then changes. The past is changed. History and politics are written time and again, and students who read any history, whether it's the history of the Republic or the history of India, must read and think, question. The big issue is to question, not accept what is given to them by any scholar. Every scholar has his or her prejudices, and it is up to the reader to try and understand what these prejudices are. So my advice is read, think, question. These three things are important, very important. Finally, how do you envision the future of Turkey in the next century? By the next century, I suppose you mean this century. And what role do you think it will play on the world stage? Well, the future of Turkey will remain bright so long as it sticks to the principles that Mustafa Kemal assigned to it 100 years ago. In these next 100 years, it should focus on education, schools, universities. I know governments take great pride in saying we've created universities, but those universities don't have libraries. If you don't have libraries, well, you can't read. I don't know. There aren't many students in this audience, but how many students use the library? Very few students use the library. Now, of course, the reliance is much more on the computer and on YouTube and on whatever. It seems you can get anything, but it's not the same as reading a book. So the future of Turkey in this century that we're living in and beyond will depend on its own educated people. The better educated they are, the better role it will play. I mean, I'm thinking of Iran again. Iran comes to mind. A revolution which hasn't gone very far beyond creating a new regime, a new Islamic regime, far away from secularism. Turkey is secular, but still Muslim. You can be Muslim in Turkey in any way that you want. Depends on the way you think about your own future and about the future of Turkey. In Iran, the regime tells you how to be a Muslim. Women are forced to wear the headscarf because even though that is not established in any Islamic book, the Quran or anywhere else, that women have to be covered, simply calls for modesty. As for men, sometimes they are forced to go and pray. If they don't want to pray, they don't pray. If you force them to pray, you don't know what they're going to do when they're in the mosque. So that the role of Turkey in this century, in the remainder of this century, and into the next century will be very important. Turkey is one of the few stable Muslim countries that exist today. It depends on how it continues in this light. Now I know there are very few people, and there is a saying, better few, but better. Now you can prove this by asking me questions. Do you have any questions which come to mind beyond the questions that Murad Bey sent me? This is one of the things that you must learn to do. Younger generation must learn to question. And question means asking questions. For instance, in class, it's not only here, but in America, in Britain, where I've taught, students do not ask questions. What does that mean? To my mind, it means that either they're not listening or they haven't understood what you're trying to say. If they haven't understood, they should nevertheless ask questions. Ask why they haven't understood. What is the reason? What are you trying to say that they haven't understood? They're there to ask you questions. And in the same way, students should be asking their book questions as they read. Every author says things which you might not agree with. Ask why you don't agree with what the author says. Try and, of course you can't ask him, he is not there, but you can nevertheless ask the book and go on from there. Well, I'm sure I haven't spent the time that I should have done, but as I thought there'd be more people and there'd be questions which were then asked. The anniversary is there to remind us of what happened and what began 100 years ago. A lot of people, a lot of students have forgotten. They have no idea what revolution Mustafa Kemal carried out. This is a reminder for them. It's up to them to follow it up by reading books. That's the only way. Or asking their elders, their parents. Well, of course, no parent has lived through the revolution itself. They're now 100 years past. But elders can tell, as you will learn from your experience of the revolution. That's why the 100th anniversary is a very important event. So was the 99th anniversary and the 98th before that, and as you go on. And in future, I hope they will continue looking at the anniversaries of the Republic and reminding people that they have to try and understand Mustafa Kemal, who he was. I mean, as a person, he was an exceptional person. I mean, as I said, he was a member of Ittihad ve Terakki, but he thought differently from them. Of course, he wasn't senior enough to tell them so. Enver was senior to him, Jamal was senior to him, Talat was senior to him, and there were others who were senior to him, but he thought, he discussed. And when the empire lost the war and the Greeks invaded the Ottoman Empire and took over the city of Izmir, that's when he realized that something had to be done, and he fought. That was the beginning of the revolution. There would have been no revolution if there had been no defeat and no attempt to take over the territories. But the Ottoman Empire lost its territories in the Arab world, in the Balkans. It remained what it is now. And at that time, Mustafa Kemal began to think in terms of a new Turk. Who is a Turk? A Turk is anyone who is born in the territories of this new Turkey. Very simple. And then came language. Anyone who speaks Turkish. Not Ottoman. He may speak Ottoman, but he must learn the new Turkish. He wanted to create the new Turk, and he did create the new Turk, and you are, in a sense, a part of that evolution. Your parents came before, but you're part of that evolution. I don't know how much time I've taken of yours, but as I said, questions would have led to more discussion.
Any questions?
But in future, in all your classes, please learn to ask questions. Don't just go to a class to sit, hopefully take notes. Now rely on your machines to take the notes, open your machine and sit back. And when I ask a student, are you taking notes? They say, no, the machine is. And then what do you do with the machine? I don't know. That's up to you. But anyway, as I said, better few but better. Thank you very much for coming and spending your time, whereas you could be sitting in the coffee house having a coffee with friends.